Have you ever felt like your soul is trying to tell you something, but the world keeps drowning it out, like there's a quiet pull beneath the surface of your life? A thread you can't name, but you feel it, in moments of silence, in dreams that stay with you, in a longing that has no clear reason. It comes when you're washing dishes, when you're staring at the trees, when a stranger says something that makes your chest tighten. It's subtle, but it's there, calling you back to yourself. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And maybe that's why you've felt so tired lately. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something in you is awakening. Old identities are shedding. Old roles feel too small. Old stories no longer fit the woman you're becoming. This isn't a breakdown. This is a soul opening. And Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, believed that what we call coincidence is often memory surfacing from other lifetimes. A familiar face, a feeling of déjà vu, a path you didn't choose but feels like it chose you. Take a breath. You are not imagining this. There is a reason your spirit feels restless. There is a reason certain patterns repeat. There is a reason you keep returning to the same emotional place, no matter how much you try to move on. This is not failure. This is invitation. An invitation to explore what lies beneath your surface, your shadow, your intuition, your soul's deeper remembering. Because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to forget. So, if you're here, it's not by accident. It's not too late. And you're not too far gone. This isn't just a video. It's a doorway. And somewhere inside you, you already knew that. So if this isn't a breakdown, but a doorway, then where does it lead? Often, it begins with something that looks like love, a connection, an intimacy, a moment that feels like finally someone sees you. But sometimes, what feels like being seen is only being imagined. There's a moment in many relationships quiet, unspoken, when the woman isn't loving the man in front of her. She's loving the possibility of who he might become. You feel it in how she looks at you. There's a softness, yes, but also an expectation, a silent hope that you'll fill a space in her story she never spoke aloud. Carl Jung called this projection when we cast the unlived parts of ourselves onto someone else, not because we're selfish, but because the psyche longs to become whole, and so she doesn't see you. She sees the archetype, the healer, the rescuer, the soulmate, not your wounds, your weariness, your truth, but the role she needs you to play in her private mythology. And you may have done the same. You saw his confidence and mistook it for emotional depth. You saw his silence and called it wisdom. You ignored the ache in your belly, the soft whisper of intuition that said, "Something's missing here." But it felt safer to believe the fantasy than to face the mirror. Because real seeing, truly seeing someone, is terrifying. It requires us to put down our stories, to meet the other not as a reflection of our dreams, but as a mirror of our truth. And Carl Jung warned, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. True connection transforms us, but projection performs us. Sometimes, what breaks our heart isn't that they didn't love us, it's that they never really saw us. And in that realization, something ancient within us stirs, the longing to be seen as we are, not as a savior, not as a fantasy, but as a soul in motion. If you've ever left a relationship wondering, was I loved or was I just convenient? If you've ever asked yourself, did they know me or did they only recognize the parts of me that fit their dream? You are not alone. This is the first veil lifting, the first light touching shadow. And once you see it, you cannot go back. Not all of her anger is really yours to carry. Not all of her demands are coming from her conscious self. Sometimes, when a woman raises her voice, withdraws her warmth, or declares who you should become. She isn't speaking from her heart. She's speaking from a part of her that she may not even know exists. Carl Jung called it the animus, the masculine image that lives inside every woman. It isn't a fantasy. It's a psychic reality, a structure built from the men she's known, the movies she's watched, the fathers she longed for but never had, the authority figures who disappointed her, the stories she's told herself to survive. The animus is not inherently dangerous. At its highest, it's the inner voice that gives her reason, focus, and direction. But when undeveloped, when ignored, suppressed, or wounded, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes the inner tyrant, and suddenly she begins to see the world not as it is, but as a battlefield. Every man becomes either a threat or a test. Every conversation turns into a quiet war. She argues not to understand, but to dominate. She moralizes not from wisdom, but from a place of rigid certainty, convinced she holds the truth, because she is afraid to hold her doubt. This is not her fault, and it's not yours either. It is the inheritance of a culture that teaches women to distrust their own softness, to associate surrender with weakness, to become strong by becoming hard. She may say she wants connection, but unconsciously, her animus is hunting control. She may speak of love, but beneath it, she is trying to prove she is untouchable. And the tragedy is, she doesn't even know she's doing it. Carl Jung described this state as a spiritual possession, not by demons, but by unconscious archetypes that take over when we refuse to confront them. And if you've ever felt confused in her presence, like you were constantly being measured, tested, found lacking, like she was debating you when you were only trying to share, you may have been speaking to her inner tyrant, not to her, because the animus, when wounded, does not listen. It lectures, it demands, it punishes, it turns a conversation into a courtroom, a partnership into a performance, love into a battlefield. So what can you do? First, don't fight it. If you try to win, you've already lost, not because you're wrong, but because you've entered a dialogue with a force that doesn't want understanding, only power. Second, don't internalize it. Her criticism isn't always about you. Sometimes, it's the voice of a father who abandoned her, a teacher who humiliated her, a husband who dismissed her pain. You are standing in the shadow of ghosts you did not create. And third, hold your ground, gently. The most powerful thing you can offer is not dominance and not submission, but presence. The animus cannot seduce a man who sees through it. The performance collapses when the audience stops applauding. So stay still, listen beyond the words, and ask yourself, is she speaking from her truth or from the voice of someone she's never confronted? Jung believed that for a woman to truly love, she must integrate her animus, not banish it, but befriend it, transform the tyrant into a guide. Let the inner masculine serve her spirit, not control it. And yes, that's her journey to walk, but yours is to stay rooted in your own center, to recognize projection when it happens, to remember you are not here to play a role in someone else's myth. You are here to live your truth and invite her to meet you there, not above you, not beneath you, but beside you. Take a breath. If you've ever been accused of things you didn't do, if you've been drawn into arguments that felt circular and confusing, if you've felt like nothing you say is enough, you may have been talking to the animus, not the woman, and recognizing that might be the beginning of your freedom. There's a kind of man we're taught to trust. He listens, he agrees, he shows up, he doesn't raise his voice, he says all the right things, and yet, months, maybe years in, you feel it. A kind of numbness, a flatness, a silence that isn't peace but absence, like you're sharing a life with someone who's always almost there. You should feel grateful. You tell yourself, he's a good man, and he is, but something inside you A deeper, older voice whispers, "Where did he go?" Carl Jung spoke of persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted. The good man is often that mask. He was raised to please, trained to seek approval, taught that his value depends on making others comfortable, especially women. So he studies your moods. He learns the script. He becomes what he thinks you want, not because he's manipulative, but because he's terrified of rejection, of conflict, of being truly seen and not chosen. He thinks love is something to earn. So he performs, he dims his needs, he suppresses his anger, he offers safety, but sacrifices truth. And over time, the man beneath the mask, his wildness, his fire, his truth, fades. You don't want to punish him. You don't want to leave. But the ache grows. You crave polarity, not control. You want to feel him, his edge, his soul, his spine. Not because you want to be dominated, but because you want to meet someone real. You want a partner, not a performer. And yet, he's afraid to show you his rawness, because he thinks it will scare you away. He believes, if I disagree, she'll withdraw. If I set a boundary, she'll stop loving me. So he smiles. He agrees. He vanishes. But here's the truth. Obedience isn't intimacy. It's avoidance. And over time, obedience kills attraction. Not because you're ungrateful, but because something in you can feel that this love is built on performance, not presence. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege comes with a price. The courage to stop playing roles, even if it means disappointing people, even if it means no longer being the good one." I once met a woman who told me, "My ex-husband never argued with me once in 18 years. He did everything I asked, and yet I never felt like I knew him." She paused. "And now I'm with someone who challenges me. He makes me uncomfortable, but I finally feel awake." It wasn't danger she wanted. It was honesty, not cruelty, but truth. So what does this mean for you? It means if you've ever felt guilty for losing interest in a kind, dependable man, you're not broken, you're not shallow, you're longing for truth. You're longing for the man beneath the mask. And for the men listening, know this: your willingness to disagree with love, to set a boundary, to speak a truth that risks rejection, is not what pushes her away. It's what allows her to finally see you. Because real presence isn't about being perfect. It's about being whole. And a man who is rooted in himself, who does not shrink to be loved, who does not perform to belong, becomes magnetic not for his perfection, but for his reality. Carl Jung believed that Eros' true soul connection only blossoms between two individuals who are fully themselves, not actors, not masks, but living, breathing beings, willing to risk being misunderstood in order to be real. So if you find yourself with a man who agrees with everything, who never says no, who never challenges you, but somehow feels distant, ask yourself gently, is he with me, or is he only afraid to lose me? Because love built on fear will always feel hollow, but love built on truth, even if messy, even if hard, will set both of you free. At some point in a man's life, there comes a silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that rings in your ears after the applause has stopped, after the relationship has ended, after you've played every role and still feel empty. It's a silence that asks, if I stop performing, who am I really? Carl Jung called this moment the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, beyond persona, beyond projection, beyond everything you were told a man should be. And he warned, it's not a path for the faint of heart, because individuation is not glamorous. It's not about achieving something. It's about unlearning everything that kept you safe. It starts with loss. You lose the identity you built to be loved. You lose the relationships that needed your silence. You lose the illusions that made life easier but not real. And in that space of unknowing, you meet the parts of yourself you buried long ago. The boy who cried and was told to toughen up. The teenager who felt too deeply but learned to hide behind sarcasm. The man who dreamed of art or softness but chose approval instead. They are still inside you, waiting. Individuation demands that you stop blaming others for not seeing you and start seeing yourself. It asks you to sit with your anger, your sadness, your need to be needed, not to fix them, not to justify them, but to witness them. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's what this path is. It's not a walk into light. It's a descent into shadow, into the basement of your soul, where your forgotten self still waits to be reclaimed. I once met a man named Thomas. He was 61, divorced twice, estranged from his children, respected in his field, admired, alone. He told me, "I spent 40 years becoming a man they could love, and not a single day becoming a man I could live with." He wasn't bitter, he was awakening, and that's when the work began. He started journaling for the first time, sitting in silence, walking without music, saying no, even when it terrified him, and slowly, painfully, he began to feel like a person, not just a provider, not just a performer, but someone real. This is the brutality of becoming. There is no applause, no trophy, no one waiting to hand you a certificate for finding your soul. There is only you, bare, flawed, and free. And in that freedom, something ancient stirs. Self-trust, not arrogance, not ego, but the quiet knowing, I am who I am. And that is enough. And for the women listening, you may not walk this path as a man, but you will know what it means to lose yourself in being everything to everyone. Individuation is not a male journey. It is a human one. It is the moment when you stop outsourcing your worth and begin the sacred work of reclaiming your soul. So if you're here, in that silence, in that ache, in that question of, who am I beneath all this? Take heart. You are not lost. You are beginning. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and yet it is also the most liberating, because the man who has faced his shadow, who has held his brokenness, who has stopped chasing applause, becomes something rare. He becomes whole, not perfect, not always strong, but real, and real, in a world built on performance, is the most magnetic thing a man can be. There are parts of you you've worked your whole life to avoid. The anger you suppress with a polite smile, the sadness you hide under responsibility, the jealousy, the fear, the shame, quiet passengers you never invited, but who never quite leave. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious self we disown in order to be accepted, not because we're weak, but because somewhere along the way, we learned that certain parts of us were unlovable, so we buried them, and in their place, we built a mask, the strong one, the good one, the reliable one, the man who always holds it together, even when his insides are falling apart. But the shadow never disappears. It waits. It shows up in your dreams, in your triggered reactions, in the tension in your jaw, in the moment you lash out at the people you love most. And don't know why. It's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to reunite with you, because inside your shadow is everything you've pushed away, but also everything you secretly long for. Your creativity, your wildness, your softness, your truth. But here's the thing. The shadow doesn't speak gently. It speaks in projections. When you blame your partner for being too emotional, maybe it's your own grief you've never allowed to surface. When you mock the man who talks about his spiritual path, maybe it's because you abandoned your own long ago. When you feel inexplicable rage, not at her, but at the way she sees you, Maybe it's because she's reflecting a part of you you've spent decades trying not to see. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The shadow is a mirror, a painful one, but if you have the courage to look, you will begin to understand why certain patterns keep repeating, why relationships collapse the same way, why love feels just out of reach, why loneliness follows you, even in a crowded room. I once knew a man named Robert, a father, a husband, a respected professional, and yet every night he would stay up in silence, numbing himself with television, avoiding a single question. Why do I feel nothing? When he finally sat with a therapist, not to fix anything, but to simply feel, he wept, not because of what he had lost, but because of what he had abandoned within himself. He said, "I spent 30 years trying to be a good man, but I forgot to be an honest one." That was the beginning of his shadow work. Shadow work isn't about becoming someone better. It's about becoming someone whole. It doesn't mean you stop feeling anger. It means you stop letting it control you from the dark. It doesn't mean you never feel envy. It means you own it and trace it back to the part of you that feels unlived. And it doesn't mean you stop being strong. It means you let strength be real. Strength that includes softness, vulnerability, depth. So how do you begin? You sit, not to fix, not to judge, but to witness. You write, you breathe. You feel the thing you've avoided since you were a boy. You stop pretending. You stop outsourcing your pain to others. And you begin to see that the shadow isn't your enemy. It's your teacher, your guide, the gatekeeper to the parts of your soul you thought you had to kill in order to survive. Carl Jung believed that until we face the shadow, we are destined to project it unto lovers, unto enemies, unto the world. But once we embrace it, we become free, not perfect, but present, grounded, rooted, and a man who has faced his own shadow can no longer be manipulated by someone else's light. He no longer chases love to feel whole. He brings his wholeness into love, and that changes everything. Inside every woman, there is a man, not of flesh, but of spirit. Inside every man, there is a woman, not for romance, but for remembrance. Carl Jung called them animus and anima, the inner masculine and inner feminine, that live quietly beneath your identity. Two energies, two voices, two mirrors, waiting to be heard. But most of us grow up learning to trust only one and exile the other. As a woman, you were taught to be soft, to nurture, to yield, to carry others before you carry yourself. And in doing so, you may have disowned your animus, the inner masculine, who gives you clarity, direction, boundary, and focus. You feel it when you say yes, even though everything in you says no, when you overgive, but feel unseen, when your truth wants to rise, but your voice shakes. That's not weakness. That's a part of you asking, "Will you let me stand with you?" As a man, you were told to be strong, stoic, unshakable, to fix, not feel, and so you buried your anima, your inner feminine, who holds your tenderness, your intuition, your longing for something deeper than success. You feel it when you're praised but still empty, when your mind is sharp but your soul is tired, when you crave connection but fear vulnerability. That, too, is a voice whispering, "Will you let me speak?" These inner lovers, anima and animus, are not enemies. They are missing pieces, not to complete you, but to return you to your own center, because until you reunite with what's been left behind, you will keep searching for it in others. You will expect a partner to be the strength you reject, the softness you deny, the clarity you avoid, the nurture you withhold from yourself. You will call it love, but Jung would call it projection. He believed that true love only begins when both the anima and animus have been acknowledged, integrated, and honored. when the man no longer needs a woman to carry his feelings for him, and the woman no longer needs a man to validate her voice. Then, and only then, can love be a meeting, not a transaction, not a rescue, but a recognition. I once met a woman in her early 50s who had spent most of her life either caregiving or compromising. She told me, every man I attracted either wanted me to mother him or feared my strength when I stopped doing it. And then one day, she stopped chasing. She started walking every morning in silence, not to fix her life, but to listen. She began writing things she was afraid to say out loud. She set boundaries without apology. She allowed herself to cry without shame. And one afternoon she said to me, I finally feel like I have my own masculine with me now. I don't need someone else to be my sword. That's integration. That's wholeness. Not becoming more masculine or more feminine, but more yourself. So how do you begin? You stop chasing the one out there and start turning toward the two within. You ask, where have I silenced my voice for harmony? Where have I feared softness out of pride? Where have I asked others to hold what I refuse to carry? You don't need to have all the answers. You only need to begin listening. Carl Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. When the inner man and the inner woman finally sit at the same table, not to battle, but to witness each other, you will feel it, not as fireworks, but as peace, a quiet knowing that you are no longer at war with yourself. That love is not something you earn. It is something you embody, because when you carry your own light and structure, your own softness and edge, you stop demanding others complete you and start inviting them to walk beside you, not as halves, but as wholes. So here you are, not perfect, not complete, but closer. You've stopped outsourcing your voice. You've begun reclaiming your boundaries. You've started to listen not just to others, but to the voice inside that doesn't shout, only whispers. And in that quietness, something changes. You no longer crave the same kind of love, the kind that flatters, the kind that fills a void, the kind that says, I'll be whoever you need me to be, because now you've met yourself. And once you meet yourself, you stop begging others to reflect back an image you no longer need. Carl Jung said, the meeting of two people is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, but only if both are real, because most of what we've called love has actually been performance, a carefully choreographed dance of roles and expectations, the rescuer and the rescued, the provider and the pleaser, the protector and the silent one. We've mistaken being chosen for being seen, being needed, for being known, but that isn't intimacy. That's emotional theater. Real love, the kind that changes you. It doesn't begin with I love who you could become. It begins with I see you as you are, no costume, no act. And this is why it's rare, because to love someone that way, you must first dare to see yourself the same, without flinching, without edits, without armor. You become the mirror. And in doing so, you invite only those who can stand that reflection. I once sat with a woman, let's call her Elena, who had walked away from a 2-decade marriage, not because there was violence, not because there was betrayal, but because, in her words, we hadn't truly looked at each other in 15 years. She said, we were polite, we did the right things, but we never asked the real questions, like, what are you afraid of right now? Or, where have you gone inside yourself that I can't find? They had mastered the performance, but forgotten the presence. So what does real love feel like? Then, it's not fireworks, it's resonance. It's the way their silence doesn't scare you, the way you can disagree without the world falling apart, the way you don't feel the need to shrink or explain or rescue, because love is no longer your mask. It's your mirror. And in that mirror, you see your own growth reflected back. You see where you still resist, where you still soften, where you still reach, not as failure, but as feedback. Real love doesn't complete you. It confronts you. It says, I'm not here to finish your story. I'm here to walk beside you while you write it. And it asks, can you stay open even when it gets uncomfortable? Can you let someone see your sorrow without rushing to wrap it in a smile? Can you hold space for another's truth even when it doesn't fit your script? Because that's what love does. It doesn't protect the image. It protects the essence. Carl Jung believed that all healing begins with wholeness, and wholeness only emerges when we stop trying to be lovable and start learning how to love from a place of truth. When you no longer chase admiration, but crave resonance. When you no longer want to be chosen, but to be mirrored honestly. And from that place, you begin to meet people who are no longer playing roles either. They won't seduce you with fantasy. They won't ask you to perform. They'll stand there as whole, flawed, beautiful beings, not looking for completion, but connection. Real love doesn't begin when someone says, I need you. It begins when someone says, I see you, and that is when everything changes. There comes a moment, often quietly, without ceremony, without applause, when you stop looking outward and begin listening inward. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like stillness, like standing alone at the edge of your own life, and finally whispering, I choose me. No one may notice. No one may thank you. No one may celebrate that choice. But something in you exhales. You stop shrinking to fit into conversations that leave you hollow. You stop bending just to be invited in. You stop performing in the name of connection and start living in the name of truth. Carl Jung called this individuation, not the pursuit of happiness, but the commitment to wholeness. And wholeness, he said, asks you to let go of who you were trained to be so you can remember who you were born to be. It is not loud. It is not glamorous. It is not always understood. Sometimes you will feel invisible, but only to the people still searching for mirrors, not for truth. Sometimes you will feel unloved, but only by those who needed you to abandon yourself in order to stay close. And sometimes you will feel unbearably alone, not because you are wrong, but because you are becoming real. And real, in a world obsessed with illusion, will always feel radical. But stay with yourself, even when no one claps, even when they don't understand, even when your voice shakes and your hands tremble, because something sacred is happening beneath the surface. Your soul is coming home. Your shadow is softening. Your anima, your animus, your inner lovers are beginning to dance, not to impress, not to perform, but to simply be. Carl Jung once wrote, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. But when you choose yourself, something changes. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak to echo your own truth. You no longer walk to be followed. You walk because your path is sacred. You no longer ask for permission to be whole. You simply are. And then, one day, maybe years later, maybe in a single unexpected moment, someone meets you. Not the mask, not the idea, but you. They don't try to change your story. They recognize it. They don't ask you to soften your edges. They sit beside you because they, too, have chosen themselves. And in that moment, you will realize you were never alone. You were just early. So let this be your quiet revolution, to choose yourself, even if no one claps, even if no one sees, even if it takes a lifetime, because the soul's journey is not measured in applause, but in presence, in honesty, in the sacred, trembling truth that you are no longer waiting to be loved the way you've always longed for, because now you love yourself that way. If your heart is still aching, that's okay. If your soul still longs, that's beautiful. You are not broken. You are just awakening. And if no one has told you this lately, I see you, and you're doing so much better than you think.